In the spring of 1893, a small group of American surveyors entered the mountains of coastal California to chart land for future roads. It was routine work, measuring distances, marking elevations, expecting nothing more than hard days and quiet nights. At first, the journey felt normal. Then the animals began to panic without cause. Certain ridgelines felt watched, even when they were empty. Men stopped joking. No one could explain why the light seemed wrong at dawn and dusk. By the time we realized something was observing us from the high ground, turning back no longer felt like a choice. So before we continue, please make sure to leave a like on Late Mysteries and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. I was hired in the spring of 1893 to carry chain and notes for a survey party working the coast ranges of California. The pay was steady, and I had been sitting too long in a cramped office in San Francisco. I wanted open ground under my boots and work that ended with a clear mark on paper. The company that signed our orders planned a new line of access roads and wanted a clean set of bearings, grades, and distances before they moved men and money into the hills. We met in Salinas with our instruments packed in 2 wooden cases, the brass already dulled from use. Harris led the party. He had been running lines since before I was old enough to shave. He spoke little during the day and corrected mistakes without raising his voice, which made them sting more. Alden was his assistant, a thin man who kept a small book of plants and stones in the same pocket as his field notebook. Boone handled the animals. He was thick in the shoulders, quick to anger with stubborn stock, and soft when it came to the pack mare that followed him close. Miguel joined us at the last moment, brought in by the company agent who said we needed someone who knew the back ways. Miguel rode quiet and kept his eyes up on the ridges more than on the trail. Our purpose was plain: locate a passable route through the Santa Lucia Range, set a baseline along a creek, and mark several points the company wanted for later claims. Harris carried a sealed packet with a rough map and instructions. He did not show it to any of us. Each morning he told us where we would push and what we needed by nightfall. Each evening he checked my figures and made me read them back to him. I learned to speak clearly and to keep my pencil sharp. The first 2 days were easy. We moved through low hills with grass already turning pale. Oaks stood scattered and still. The morning started cold and bright. By noon the sun pressed down hard enough that Boone loosened his collar and cursed the dust. We kept a steady pace, stopping when Harris called for a station. I would set the chain while Alden held the rod. Harris worked the transit, his face close to the eyepiece. Miguel watched the edges of the open ground while Boone checked the animals and kept flies off their eyes. On the 3rd day, we left the wider valley and took a narrow track that climbed into darker growth. The air changed. The heat stayed, but it did not feel open anymore. The trees came in tight, and the brush pressed close to our legs. Our animals began to sweat, and Boone started rearranging loads so the cases sat higher on the packs. We crossed a creek that ran clear and cold over rounded stones. Harris ordered us to camp there and take a set of readings before light failed. He wanted the baseline, started at first light, and did not want arguments over where we began. That evening, I sat by the fire and rewrote my notes in ink. I did it out of habit because pencil can smear and paper can tear. Harris sat a few steps away, rolling a cigarette with careful fingers. Alden was cleaning the glass on the transit. Boone fed the animals and checked their shoes. Miguel kept walking beyond the firelight, then returning without speaking. I thought he was counting the pack animals or looking for a stray, but he did not carry a rope or call out. After we ate, Harris asked him, "Do you expect trouble on this route?" Miguel looked at Harris, then at the hills. "Not from men," he said. Boone let out a short laugh. "Then from what? Cats?" Miguel did not answer at once. He picked up a stick and pushed coals together, keeping the fire steady. "Some places have watchers," he said. "Old talk. People see them on the high ground." Alden glanced up from the glass. "Watchers?" Miguel nodded once. "Dark figures. They stand and look down. They do not come close." Boone snorted. "Men standing on peaks with nothing to do." That is your story? Miguel's face stayed calm. Not men. Harris spoke in the same tone he used when he corrected a number. We are here to run lines, not trade tales. If you know of a hazard, speak it plain. Miguel kept his gaze on the dark beyond the trees. The hazard is fear, he said. Men make mistakes when they think something watches them. They step wrong. They walk off the trail. They shoot at shadows and hit each other. I wanted to laugh with Boone, but I did not. Miguel did not talk much, and the fact that he chose to say this made me listen. I tried to judge his manner. He was not drunk, not trying to impress. He spoke as if he were warning us about a broken bridge. Alden asked, "Where are these figures seen?" Miguel answered, "At the edges of light, dawn, dusk, places with open stone, ridgelines. They do not leave tracks. You look straight at them. They are gone." Boone tossed a bone into the fire. "Then do not look straight." Harris ended it with a wave of his hand. "Enough. Boone, first watch. Wake me at midnight." Boone complained, but he took his bedroll close to the pack animals. I lay back listening to the creek and the low noises of the animals settling. The talk stayed in my mind longer than I wanted. I told myself it was a local story used to keep people from wandering, like the stories about quicksand and ghosts in old mines. Still, I could not help noticing how the darkness beyond the firelight felt heavier than it had in the valley. The next day, we pushed higher. The trail narrowed and broke into stretches where we had to lead the animals one by one. The brush tore at our sleeves. The ground underfoot shifted from soil to loose rock. Twice we stopped to rest the animals, while Boone adjusted packs and muttered at the cinches. Harris did not hurry us, but he watched the sun and the slope, and I could tell he wanted a certain point before we camped. Alden kept stopping to pick up pieces of stone, then dropping them when Harris called him back. Miguel moved ahead and returned often, checking turns, testing the ground with his boot, and watching the ridge tops. Near late afternoon, we came to a long open face of rock where the trees fell away. The stone was bare and pale, with small shrubs clinging in cracks. The air was still and sound carried. Harris called a halt and set up the transit on a flat shelf. Alden held the rod at a point Harris chose. I stretched the chain and called out distances while Harris took readings. Boone sat with his back to a boulder and drank from his canteen. Miguel stood apart and scanned the high ground. I was writing a number when I noticed Miguel had stopped moving. His head was tilted and his eyes were fixed on a notch of ridge above us. The sun was low enough that the notch was in shadow, while the rock around it still held light. I followed his gaze and saw a shape standing on the skyline where the stone met the sky. At first, I thought it was a man. The outline was upright and still. It looked tall. It had a narrow head and shoulders that fell into a long, straight body, wider at the bottom than at the top. There was no movement of arms. There was no turn of the head. It stood where there was no trail and no brush, only broken rock. I blinked and looked again, wanting to see a clearer detail, but the light on the ridge shifted as the sun dropped. The shape remained dark. Alden noticed my pause and turned his eyes upward. Boone followed. Harris was still at the instrument, but his voice tightened when he asked, "What are you all staring at?" No one answered at once. Miguel raised a hand and pointed without speaking. Harris stepped back from the transit and looked where Miguel pointed. He stared for a few seconds, then said, "That is a stump." "There are no trees there," Alden said. Boone stood up. "Then it is a man." Miguel said, "Do not call to it." Boone's mouth opened, but he did not shout. He stared, then took 2 steps toward the edge of the shelf as if he wanted a better angle. Harris grabbed his sleeve and held him back. "Stay where you are," Harris said. "We are not chasing strangers across rock at dusk." I kept my eyes on the ridge. The shape had not moved. I tried to find legs, to see a shift of weight, to catch any sign of wind on cloth. There was nothing. The longer I looked, the more my stomach tightened. not from a belief in tales, but from the certainty that something was there and that it did not belong. Harris said, "Alden, bring the glass." Alden took the small field glass from his bag and lifted it to his eyes. He stared, then lowered it and looked again without the glass, as if checking his own sight. "It is there," he said quietly. "It has no detail. It is only dark." Miguel spoke in a low voice. "Do not look straight," he said. I heard the words and felt my own focus sharpen, as if my eyes were being pulled toward the shape. I forced myself to glance away for a moment, then back. When I looked again, the ridgeline was empty. The notch held only rock and sky. Boone swore under his breath. Alden lowered the glass and rubbed his eyes. Harris stood still for a long moment, then stepped back to the transit and began packing it without speaking. Miguel did not look satisfied. He looked as if he expected more. Harris did not speak about it while we made camp. He chose a flat strip of ground below the rock face, where a thin stand of pines broke the wind. Boone set the animals close and kept them tied short. Alden gathered dead branches without wandering far. Miguel went out of sight once, but I heard him moving through brush and returning by a different path. I stayed near the fire and kept my notebook in my lap, writing the day's figures twice to make sure my hand did not slip. When dusk settled, the ridge above us lost its last color. The open rock face turned the same shade as the trees, and the sky darkened without clouds. The fire made a small circle that felt too weak for the amount of ground around us. Boone ate fast and kept glancing out. Alden tried to speak about the work, asking Harris whether we would need a second baseline or whether the creek below could serve as our measure. Harris answered him, but kept his eyes lowered, as if he were working through a problem that did not involve chain or transit. After we ate, Boone broke first. "You saw it," he said to Harris. "Do not say stump." Harris stared into the fire. "I saw a shape. That is all." "It was a man," Boone said. "Someone watching us." Miguel said, "Not someone." Boone turned on him. "You put that in our heads. You talk about watchers, and then we see one." Miguel's tone stayed even. "I did not put it on the ridge." Alden asked, "How often do people see them?" Miguel looked at Alden as if deciding how much to give him. "Some men never see anything. Some see them once. Some see them months. Some see them until they leave the mountains. If you chase them or call to them, men say they come closer, not with feet. They are nearer when you look again." Boone made a short sound that could have been a laugh. "They come closer without moving." "That is not a thing," Miguel said. "It is a thing men report." Harris lifted a hand. "We will keep our heads. We are not children. We have a job and we will do it. We do not split up. We do not wander. We do not shoot at anything we cannot name. That is all." Boone wanted to argue, but he swallowed it. He swallowed it. He lay down with his rifle within reach. Alden rolled in his blanket, but kept his eyes open longer than usual. Miguel took first watch without being asked. He sat with his back to a tree and his face turned toward the dark slope above camp. I slept in pieces. Each time I woke, the fire had changed shape, and the sounds of the animals had shifted. Once I heard Boone whisper something sharp, not a full word, and I raised my head enough to see him kneeling near the mare, steadying her by the halter. She stood rigid, her ears forward, breathing hard through her nose. Boone stroked her neck until she settled. When I lay back, I tried to tell myself it was only a cat or a scent on the wind. The thought did not calm me. The night felt too still for ordinary causes. At first light, Harris woke us and had us eat quickly. The sky was pale and cold. The trees held beads of moisture that shook loose when Boone moved through them. We packed in silence. Harris checked the cases himself, tapping the latches and running his fingers along the corners. Alden tried to speak to him about where we would set the day's first station. Harris did not answer at once. He watched the ridges where the rock face rose above the pines. Miguel said, "We go before the sun hits the stone." Boone muttered, "So they can see us better?" Miguel ignored him and led the way. The trail climbed in sharp turns and soon the trees thinned again. We reached another open stretch of broken rock, higher than yesterday's station. From there, we could see beyond the nearer ridges into a deeper set of folds. The land dropped steep on one side into a shadowed ravine. On the other side, the slope rose into a line of peaks with bare outcrops. The sun had not cleared the higher ridge behind us, and the air stayed cold enough that my breath showed when I spoke. Harris chose a spot and set the tripod. Alden placed the rod. I pulled the chain straight and called distances. My voice sounded too loud against the stone. Boone kept the animals back from the edge. Miguel stood where he could see both our work and the high ground ahead. We finished the first set of readings without trouble. Harris marked the station on a small sketch and nodded once, satisfied. He ordered us forward along a contour that would keep us above the ravine. In places, we had to step over slides of loose stone that shifted under our weight. By mid-morning, the sun reached us and warmed the rock. We moved around a jutting wall of stone and came into a narrow saddle between two high points. The wind there was steady and dry. It carried the smell of heated rock and something else I could not place at first. It was sharp and thin, like old cloth left too long in a damp place. Boone noticed it too. "What is that?" he asked. Miguel did not answer. He had stopped and was looking down at the ground near the center of the saddle. Harris came up beside him. "What is it?" Miguel pointed. "No tracks," he said. I stepped closer and saw what he meant. The saddle was a strip of dirt and gravel with scattered tufts of grass. Yet the surface was smooth, as if no hoof or paw had pressed it in days. Even the grass stood straight. Alden crouched and ran his fingers over the dirt. "It is hard," he said. "Baked." Harris scanned the saddle and the ridges on both sides. "We keep moving," he said. "Do not dwell." We crossed it quickly. As my boots hit the far side, I felt an urge to turn and look back. I did not turn at first. I kept my eyes on the ground ahead, placing my steps where the rock was firm. Then Boone spoke in a rough whisper. "Do not look," he said, and I knew he was not talking to the animals. My neck tightened. I kept walking for 3 more steps, then stopped. Harris was ahead. Miguel had paused too, his shoulders stiff. Alden stood with the rod in his hand, frozen in place. Boone's eyes were wide and fixed on the ridge behind us. I turned my head only enough to see the skyline without facing it straight. On the crest we had just crossed, a dark figure stood where the saddle met the higher rock. It was taller than any man I knew. It looked narrow, with a long, straight fall from shoulders to ground. The outline was not sharp in the morning light. It was as if the darkness did not belong to the sun. It stood with no shift, no sway, no sign of breathing. My mouth went dry. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, the start of a headache, sudden and deep. The shape was too steady. It was placed like a watcher on purpose. Alden's voice came out thin. "It is closer." Boone's hand went to his rifle. Harris snapped, "No." Boone froze with his fingers on the stock. Harris stepped forward until he was beside Boone, then reached out and pushed the rifle down. "We keep moving," Harris said. "Now." Miguel spoke without turning his full face to the ridge. "Do not give it your eyes," he said. "Walk." Boone swallowed hard. "It is watching," he said. Harris did not answer. He started forward. We followed, forced by his movement and by the sense that stopping would make things worse. I kept my eyes on the ground and the trail. Still, I felt the pull to look back. My thoughts became narrow. Step. Balance. Do not stumble. Do not turn. After a minute, Harris called a halt near a cluster of boulders that blocked the wind. We gathered close. Boone's face was pale beneath the dust. Alden's hands shook. Miguel's eyes were flat, as if he had expected this. Harris spoke in a low, controlled voice. "We will not panic. We will not break formation. We will finish the line to the next creek, and we will camp lower. If any of you cannot do the work, say so now." No one spoke. Boone finally said, "That was not a man." Alden nodded once, fast. Miguel said nothing. Harris looked at me. Can you keep your numbers straight? I forced myself to answer, yes. Then we go, Harris said. We moved again, but the group had changed. Boone stayed closer to Harris. Alden stopped collecting stones and kept his head down. Miguel walked behind us now, watching our back trail. We did not see another figure that morning, but the sense of being watched did not fade with the sun. It moved with us, rising when the trail opened and easing only when trees closed in. At noon, we reached a narrow stream that cut through a shaded fold of the range. As Boone untied the packs, the mare shied hard and nearly pulled free. Boone grabbed the rope and swore, then paused. He was staring at her flank. I stepped closer and saw fresh marks on her hide, 3 long lines, shallow but raw, as if something had dragged against her through cloth. The hair was scraped away. There was no blood, only red skin. Boone's voice went tight. Harris frowned and leaned in. Could be brush, he said. Boone shook his head hard. No brush touched her there. She has been against me all morning. I would have seen it. Alden reached out but stopped his hand before touching the marks. Claws? He asked. Miguel said no, in a way that did not explain. Boone stared at Miguel. Then what did it? Miguel looked up toward the ridgeline. Stop asking what it is, he said. Ask what it is, he said. He said, Hun, we are men with tools. The mountains do not want anything. Miguel's gaze stayed on the broken light. Men say that, he replied. Harris turned away and began setting the transit with sharp movements. Alden stood close to me, his face pale. In a low voice, Alden said, Do you feel it when you look near the ridges? The pressure? I nodded once. Yes. He swallowed. That is not ordinary fear. I did not know how to answer him. I only knew the feeling did not leave when I tried to reason it away. It settled deeper the more I tried to deny it, like a weight that shifted to stay on top of you. Harris called for the rod, and Alden snapped into motion. I stretched the chain and called out numbers. For a while, the work held my mind. The sound of Harris writing in his book, the click of the instrument, the steady voice calling angles. All of it pulled me back into the world I understood. The moment the readings ended, the other world pressed in again. When we packed to leave the creek, Miguel walked to the water and crouched low. We do not camp high tonight, he said. Harris nodded once. Agreed. Boone asked, How low? Miguel pointed down the course of the stream. Below the next bend, he said, where the trees thicken, where the ridges cannot see straight down. Alden looked uneasy, so hiding helps. Miguel did not answer. He started walking. We followed the stream down into thicker growth. The trees closed overhead and the ground softened. I began to feel a small relief. Then, near late afternoon, we found something that ended that relief. The stream widened into a shallow pool where the water slowed. On the bank, half in mud, lay a deer. Its eyes were open. Its neck was twisted at an angle that did not belong to any fall. There were no cuts, no blood, no sign of a struggle in the brush. The legs were drawn in tight as if the animal had stiffened all at once. Boone stared at it. That is fresh, he said. Alden stepped closer and stopped short. It looks wrong, he whispered. Harris looked around the pool and the trees. A cat could break a neck, he said, but his voice did not carry conviction. Miguel's face tightened. Do not touch it, he said. Do not take meat. We leave it. We walked around the pool wide, keeping our eyes low. That night, we camped deeper under trees than Harris would normally choose. Boone complained, then fell silent when the animals began to tug at their ropes for no reason. Harris set our bedrolls close together. After the fire died down to coals, Harris spoke. This line will take 2 more days if we keep our pace. We will finish and turn back by the easier route. No more ridge work at dusk. Boone asked, and if it keeps following? Harris stared at him. Then we keep moving. Alden said, What if it wants us to look? Miguel's eyes flicked to Alden. It does, he said. Boone's jaw tightened. Why? Miguel answered in a flat tone, To know you see it. To know you carry it in your head. Harris spoke as if cutting off a line with a knife. "We sleep," he said. "Boone, first watch. Miguel, second. Alden, wake me if anything comes into camp." Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound I could not place. It was not a footstep. It was a soft scrape, like stone dragged against stone, slow and deliberate. Boone's whisper came from near the animals. "Stay," he said, not loud. I lifted my head and saw the mule nearest the trees pulling at its rope. The scrape continued, then stopped. The silence that followed felt full, as if something had paused to listen. Miguel's voice came from the dark. "Do not look out," he said. Boone hissed. "It is there." Miguel answered, "Yes." Harris stirred and sat up. "Where?" he asked. Miguel spoke fast. "Do not stand. Do not face it. Keep the fire low. Keep your eyes down." Harris froze. Alden sat up too, trembling. Boone's breath came hard. "I can feel it," he said. "It is close." The scrape started again, nearer now, just beyond the edge of firelight. I kept my eyes on the ground, but my mind drew a picture of a tall shape standing among the trunks, watching. The pressure behind my eyes returned stronger than before, and with it came a sharp thought that did not feel like mine. Turn and look. See it. Know it. My hands clenched in my blanket. I forced my gaze to stay on the dirt. I listened. The scrape moved along the tree line, slow, steady, never stepping into light. Boone whispered curses through his teeth. Harris's voice was tight. "We cannot sit here if something is circling." Miguel said, "If we run, we fall. If we shout, we draw it in. Let it pass." Alden whispered, "It is not passing." The scrape stopped again. For a moment, there was only the water and the animals breathing. Then, from somewhere above us in the trees, a small shower of needles fell, as if a branch had been brushed. Boone jerked his head up, despite Miguel's warning, and the instant he did, the mare screamed, a high sound that cut through the camp. Boone rose halfway, rifle coming up. Harris grabbed his arm. "Down." Harris snapped. Boone fought him for a second, then sank back, shaking. "I saw it," he whispered, voice breaking. "It was right there." Miguel's voice sharpened. "You look straight." Boone's eyes were wide and wet. "It was not on the ground. It was on the rock behind the trees. It was higher than us. It was looking through." Alden whispered, "Through what?" Boone swallowed hard. "Through everything." Harris's face had lost some color. He looked at Miguel. "What do we do?" Miguel's answer came without pause. "At first light, we leave the line," he said. "We go down. We do not finish. If you keep working, it stays with you. If you go lower, it may let you go." Harris's jaw tightened. "We are paid to finish." Miguel's eyes held his. "Then you are paid to bring bodies back." Harris looked away. The scrape did not return, but the sense of presence stayed until dawn. When the first gray light came, Harris made the decision. He packed the transit and closed the case with a hard snap. Boone loaded the animals fast. Alden gathered his books and kept glancing into the trees. Miguel led us down along the stream without waiting for Harris's order. As we descended, the air warmed. I felt a small loosening in my chest. Boone's steps steadied. Alden began to speak again, anchoring himself with facts. Then, when we reached a bend where the stream cut away from the slope, Harris stopped and looked back up. Miguel caught his arm. "Do not," he said. Harris pulled free. He raised the field glass and stared toward the high ridge where the saddle lay. His face did not change at first. Then his mouth tightened. Alden asked, "Do you see it?" Harris lowered the glass slowly. "I see 3, he said. My stomach dropped. Miguel's voice turned hard. "Then we do not stop again until we reach the low country. We do not camp in these mountains." Harris nodded once, and the party moved with a new kind of urgency. We did not speak much as we went down. The trail widened into older tracks, then into a rough road cut by wagons. The sense of pressure lessened with each drop in elevation. By mid-afternoon, we reached a stretch where grass grew thick again and the trees stood farther apart. Harris called a halt. "We will camp here," he said. One night, then we head back to Salinas. Boone let out a breath of relief. "You think it followed?" Miguel shook his head slowly. "Not here." Alden asked. "Why?" Miguel answered. "These are not their places." Harris looked at him. "Then why show themselves at all?" Miguel met his eyes. "Some men say they are markers. Some say they are warnings. Some say they are only there to be seen." Harris did not like that answer. He turned away and began checking the cases. That evening, the camp felt different. The fire burned clean. The animals fed and settled without trouble. Boone cooked more than usual. We ate in silence at first. Then Alden and Boone began to speak about other work, telling ordinary stories about fog and missing tools. The stories did not have the weight of the Watcher tales. Harris finally spoke. "I have never left a line unfinished," he said. He stared into the fire. "I will file the report as incomplete. I will say the terrain proved unsuitable." Boone nodded. "That is true enough." That night, I slept without waking until dawn. We broke camp early and followed the road down. The land opened fully. The ordinary world settled around us again. The smell of cattle, the sound of wind and grass, the distant creak of wood. In Salinas, Harris dismissed us with our pay and a short word of thanks. Alden left at once. Boone went to the stable. Miguel lingered near the edge of town. I found him there as he stood watching the low hills to the west. "You knew about them," I said. Miguel nodded once. "I knew people saw them." "Had you seen them yourself?" He hesitated, then said, "Once, when I was younger." "What happened?" "I looked," he said. "Then I left." "That is all?" "That was enough." I thought of the 3 Harris had seen on the ridge. "Why 3?" Miguel shrugged. "Sometimes it is 1, sometimes more. They do not count the way men do." I wanted to ask more, but he had turned away. I left Salinas the next day and returned to my office work. The mountains stayed in my thoughts longer than I wanted them to. At first, I told myself the figures were nothing more than light and shadow shaped by expectation and fear. Those thoughts worked for a time. Months later, I was sent north to review notes from another survey party. One of their men had written a short margin note beside a station sketch, saw shapes on the ridge at dusk. Did not approach. Left early. No explanation followed. Years passed. I heard similar comments in other places, always brief, always left out of formal records. Men did not like to speak of them unless pressed. I never saw the figures again. I did not seek them. Still, sometimes at dawn or dusk, when light thins and long shadows form on high ground, I feel the same pressure behind my eyes, the same pull to look longer than sense allows. When that happens, I turn away. The work of men is to measure and mark. The work of the mountains is older and does not require our understanding.